just 3.5% of Bengalurians, which is like 3 to 4 in 100 of Bengalurians, are aware or interested in environment and ecosystems around us. What else could explain our inability? When I say our, it's just both people and the administration, inability to manage waste, curb pollution levels, or to ensure that our lakes and rivers are clean and flowing. Soon, Bengaluru, and I should thank you, Mr. Professor Ramachandra, for this interesting study. And soon, Bengaluru will become an international city, or it has already emerged as an international city. With such growth, and it has become imperative that we come up with sustainable growth models, measures in which we ensure that ecosystems are not overshadowed by economy or infrastructure development for that matter. How do we gear up to this challenge? Okay, if you are thinking that this is a session about ornithology, let me just clarify, or if you're still thinking so, we thought we should use birds as a metaphor because they are one of the most visible indicators of our healthy ecosystem. And Mr. Krishna is here. Many of Bengalurians are into birding. So it's a very popular pastime in Bengaluru. So we thought it would interest people here. So that is why. So to bring birds and other creatures back in Bengaluru and make them thrive, we should ensure that Bengaluru changes for the better. So Professor Ramachandra, I would like to start from you. So there are many studies that on Bengaluru these days, and with every study we see alarm bells ringing. But how many of them culminate into action? So what do you think? How do you think government can actually leverage science while formulating policies on environment in Bengaluru? Are they missing anything?
Well, when I look at the current planning, or what happened during the last 1.5 decades, even the Chief Minister talked about it, unplanned growth. You know, if you're talking about sustainable future, what does sustainable future means? If I ensure clean air and water and environment to our children, I would say we have done the job. For that, you need to do the planning. For the planning, scientific data helps. You know, the Bangalore being the knowledge capital of India, you know, we should take advantage of that kind of the data that we have developed over the last 4 or 5 decades and put it in the policy and take appropriate policy. The current, if you look at the governance mechanism, we all know it's a fragmented governance and ad hoc approaches. If something goes wrong, immediately do something. For example, classic case is Belandur-Vartur Lake. When there was a froth, you know, instead of solving the problem of froth at the addressing the causal factor, what did we do? We constructed a barricade. This is an ad hoc approach. You know, that kind of growth should stop in our state and in our country. Now, when you look at the kind of the data what we have, you know, I always believe in Punarjanma. I was there when Kempegowda was there, and I'm here today, and I'll come back in, you know, after 200 years. If you look at the kind of the Bangalore of 740 square kilometers today, in 1800 we had 1,452 water bodies and 80% green cover. In 1970s, we had 68% green cover in the city and about 8% was under buildings. And today, 2021 data if you look at, it is 85% is concretized. See, we all need water. We need a livable environment. When you have livable environment, you can bring birds back. See, when we talk about livable environment, I am an ecologist. We look at the biotic and abiotic component. If abiotic component are in place, then automatically biotic component will be there with a good health. So when I talk about biotic component, health of the humans also are included in that. See, when you look at the way the things are happening, the instances of kidney failure is increasing in the city, or the cancer is increasing in the city. This is quite worrying. Why the kidney failure happens? Look at the way the lakes have been contaminated with industrial effluents, untreated sewage, etc. Those contaminants are getting into our food chain. And that is, the data what I have, if you look at that data, you will be pained to see such a situation. The kidney failure, which was 1 in 1 lakh about 12 years back, today it's 1 in 5,000. For any country or any region to prosper, healthy youth matters. Healthy youth constitute an asset of the nation. If the health of the youth is failing because of the kidney failure, etc., we are not doing the good job. That is where planning has to happen. Probably I'll give more details in the next round, okay?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I would like to come to you, Leo. So Bengaluru has seen a string of successes with environmental campaigns and movements. At the same time, we have seen urbanization and concretization increasing at a increased pace. So, and our approach towards urbanization hasn't changed much. As we talk here now, we know that in Kabban Park, a set of infrastructure projects are underway. So what do you think? How do you think environmental campaigns can be more effective and sustained?
Thanks, Anita. And I think, it would help to just lean back on the speech the Chief Minister made. And I think he laid out in such granular detail his vision for the city. And it's nice to know what his vision is, not that we should accept it and embrace it just because the Chief Minister has put it out. But one thing that came out from that, to me, which is particularly important, is that he actually said that he's going to make his vision, he's going to submit and subordinate his vision to public debate. One of the problems we have, and you raised Kabban Park as an issue, is that we forget that we are a democracy. And any environmental social problem that you find and discover or stumble upon or suffer from, you will find that it is an outcome of the failure of an effort to use the democratic tools that we have. And I think we are going through a time in our history, in this country, where centralization has become the theme. 2040, if this trend continues, and I'm sharing this more as a matter of fact, not a cynical response to the situation, I'd like to look back at what 2000 was, so 22 years ago, when then Chief Minister S.M. Krishna had also his visions. And I recall being there and thinking, is it not a paradox that we actually have a Chief Minister thinking of her city amongst tens of cities of a state, when the Chief Minister's role is actually to think of the entire state? And imagine what the entire state should, sort of get because of that effort. What came out was the Bangalore Agenda Task Force. And I feel that such elitization has actually resulted in the kind of situation we are now in. There has been a systematic failure in democracy. We don't have a local government in the city, and yet we are imagining what the city should be. So who is articulating whose visions here? So if we continue on this path, if 2000 was the horizon from where we look at 2022, we know where we have come. It has accumulated wealth. We have probably 120,000 millionaires, 4 or 5 billionaires. So is that the indicator of progress, you see? And so when you say metaphorically, bring back birds to Bangalore, you're using it as an ecological indicator as well. So the sparrow, which was something that I grew up with, I can't see anymore. Now that's not just a metaphor, it's actually a literal expression of how degradation has taken place. Dr. Subramania, a good friend of mine, an ornithologist, at the request of the High Court, looked at the migratory waterfowl that we had counted in early 90s, between 89, Krishna was there, so many of us, we went out voluntarily. And we, I think, looked at 110 lakes. And we accumulated evidence of the migratory waterfowl which came here. Now these birds come from Mongolia, Siberia, across the Himalayas and so on. What we found is, we found more than 100,000 birds then. We found only a few thousand now. So there is a precipitous fall in migratory waterfowl populations coming to our lakes. So they are telling us more than what we want to even wrap our heads around. Now, another way to see it is that, if you look at what the Chief Minister said about waste, is a metaphor because we prefer to dump our waste in our villages, and we don't absorb the impact we have from such careless actions. So I think I'll stop here now because I know you're shortage of time.
Thank you, Leo. So Disha, for you now. So far from being victims of climate change, we have seen youngsters across the globe fighting back like never seen before. So Bengaluru is no different, we have you here. So how do you, young leaders like you, would want to engage with the government and even common public to press them into action?
Thank you for the question, Anita. I think one thing that I would also like to go back to what the CM said. He said that he's open to engaging in conversations. He's open to having the people, civil societies, engage in conversations about the policies they make, about whatever laws they want to pass. But the truth is, every time we've tried to engage in a conversation with the government about different environmental policies, both on a city level, a state level, or a national level, they haven't been open to it. They haven't been open to criticism, or they haven't been open to any sort of feedback from the citizens. So I think there is quite enough engagement from young people as well as adults and the citizens of India. So more than asking about what we can do to engage better, I would like more people in the government to understand and explore how to engage with citizens better, how to actually take feedback and criticism in a positive way, because at the end of the day, we all want what's better for the planet, for each other, and the city. So I think that's something we really need to focus on. And also, you mentioned that 3 people in Bangalore care about the environment, which is quite sad because every single one of us is a part of nature and the environment. All of us are dependent on water, on air, and if we really need to stop seeing the environment as something that's separate from us, and we need to start seeing it as something that is a part of us, because we will not be able to survive if we don't focus on nature. We will not be able to survive without clean water and air and basic amenities. So I think that's something we need to learn.
Disha, this is just like an offshoot of what you're saying. So many youngsters are interested in climate change, environment movements now. Do you have any suggestions for them, those who want to actively participate in civic movements on environment and climate change? Some practical tips.
I think one thing I personally learned is that we make a lot of mistakes because we're young, and that's completely fine. And I look at Leo because I've been so inspired by his work, and I've learned so much from him, and you as well, sir. So I think it's important for us to also make it an intergenerational thing, because we're all dependent on the environment, and it's always a learning process. And one thing that personally excites me is the more I know, the more I realize how much I don't know. And I think that's very exciting because there's so much to learn, and I hope that youngsters also see it that way and keep it as a learning process instead of realizing this as a one-time thing. So anyone who wants to join the movement it's just a learning curve that they will forever be on.
Okay, thank you. So I'll come to you, Leo, now. Do you think that public complacency, which we can't deny, stems from the fact that we have lost that connection with our local resources, like land and water or lakes, because what we do or what we don't, I'm referring to waste or sewage that flows into the lakes in Bengaluru, it actually doesn't affect us much. So how do you think we can change this?
I think that's a very interesting question, because I'm reading up on ancient history now, and one of the parts that fascinate me is the Harappans. The cities in Harappa, more than 130 have been identified, only a few have been uncovered. One of the fascinating things when you see the archaeological remains of those cities is that the city was built around commons. And they had a very clear idea of how to contain the damage, use can do to commons, or a lack of attention can do to the commons. And therefore, you can see that the sensitivity in which they shape their cities around water is why they survived for 1,000 years. Those cities survived for 1,000 years. Does Bangalore have the chance in 50 years' time to be a city where you can say there is a reasonably good quality of life? If the last 20, 25 years is any indicator of which way we are going, it's unlikely. Areas will get gentrified. Commons which belong to those gentrified neighborhoods will probably get all the investment, and most of the peri-urban areas will decay. And that will have a fractured development, and such a fractured idea of a metropolitan area with 14 million people now, and I hope it never happens that we have to go and dam the Kaveri and destroy her because we need water. And it should not be an outcome of political games and I will do it faster than yours, because the Kaveri is almost gone. There is not much you can survive by drawing water from so far away. So if you are looking at the commons which shaped the city 500 years, 1,000 years ago, lakes come to mind because you have water. But there were a lot of watersheds which were protected then. We have built over all of them. What we really have is the narrow canals. So if you want to imagine in 2041 low-hanging fruit that we have certainly been able to, we can certainly achieve, is an idea that came out of Justice N.K. Patil Committee's report, an outcome of the case I was part of. 840 kilometers of Rajakalways, strip them of the concrete, ensure they turn into green ribbons in which you plant endemic vegetation so that the water that flows through it will get cleansed naturally, free sunlight, free plants, don't have to put money in STPs. Take the CAG report, all our STPs have failed. So to go into that technocratic society is failure bound. And then the lakes hopefully will be swimmable. And as Justice Patil also wished in his report, maybe some of the lakes is from where we can drink water from.
That's a great point, Leo.
And
Thank you.
Professor Ramachandra will dwell more on that.
Yeah. Sir, to you now. So you just don't point at problems. You also offer solutions. So we have an example at IISc campus. Your team has developed a forest, a replica, or mini replica of Western Ghats forests. And you have shown that we can do, and it has been replicated elsewhere to that model. So do you think that local action will help in addressing or mitigating climate change in cities like Bengaluru?
Yeah, certainly local action helps. For example, let me take up the case of water. See, everybody talks about Mekedatu project, but we need to understand that project is going to create a disaster in the Bangalore. The Mekedatu project, submerges the forest area, about 5,000 hectares. In that, about 3,500 hectares is the Kaveri Wildlife Sanctuary. And another 1,000 hectares is the reserve forest. And already that forest is doing a wonderful job of, when you look at the hydrological regime, the process of infiltration, when I quantify the water that is stored every year when it rains, it's about 100 TMC. We remove that tree and then store 65 TMC and say that the water is for Bangalore. Does it mean that Bangalore doesn't have the water? Let me give you the statistics. Bangalore receives the rain of 700 to 850 millimeter rainfall. If I catch that rain, I have 15 TMC of water. That means Bangalore requires 18 TMC. That means 70% required for Bangalorean is available in the form of rain. Can't we catch that? Harvest the rainwater and use it? And if you are using 18 TMC, you are generating 18 TMC of wastewater. Can't we treat that? The model is already there at Jakkur. Jakkur Lake, when it was rejuvenated in 2010, I made sure that constructed wetland and algal pond is integrated. There are no contaminants come to the Jakkur Lake. Way back in 2005, my study shows surrounding the Jakkur Lake, about 25 wells were there. The wells had nitrate, Jakkur Lake had nitrate. Today, after the constructed wetland, my students have monitored for the last 10 years. There is no contamination. Nutrient removal has happened. That is the model. Municipality cannot go for tertiary treatment plant, but what we need is the economical option of constructive wetland integrated with a secondary treatment plant. That will solve our problem. You know, 18 TMC if we treat, 1 minute, the 16 TMC treated water you will have. That means 15 plus 16 TMC, 31 TMC of water is there in the city if we manage it properly. For that, I have a 5R formula. First R is a responsible citizen. When people become responsible, they will never pollute the lake. Then they allow the rejuvenation of the lake. When we rejuvenate the lake, we can retain the rainwater and treated wastewater also, so that we have sufficient water. The sustainability of water will solve most of our problem. Let us not contaminate our environment. Let us give a clean water to our children.
Thank you, sir. So we have one question for Disha, and then we would like to take questions from the audience. So I think we'll be able to take one or two questions, just that. So Disha, you had a brush with the authorities. I say brush with the authorities last year. So we keep hearing that we should not mix politics with environment. So do you think that it's really possible to separate politics from environment activism?
I think the people who say that we can't mix environment with politics have never had their land stolen, like the Adivasis are getting their land stolen in Chhattisgarh, or even or people who have their houses submerged, like Sir said in Make It That Too, or people who've had to breathe very, very bad air and have had to have lung problems or health diseases. So all of these were political decisions taken by our leaders. And even today, the CM said, oh, that the Make It That Too is in the news suddenly, but he will still go ahead with the construction of it. Right before that, he spoke about engaging with citizens. So that's two very contradicting statements in itself, because there are a lot of citizens opposing the Make It That Too project. So how can you, go ahead with something without actually engaging in conversations with those who have suggestions or objections? So saying that the environment is not political is a very, very privileged statement, because the environment is very political. The air we breathe has been made very political. The land we live on has been very political, because for ages, all we talk about is ownership of land, but the truth is we should really be talking about the responsibility of land. Instead of fighting for ownership, we should be talking about who is responsible for taking care of this land, who is responsible for preserving it. But all we do is fight over land and steal it from people who have been conserving it for way before we were even born. So we can't say that the environment is not political, because it's very, very political for people who've had to die over it.
Okay, thank you. That was a great point, Disha. So Leo, to you now. So we have seen public spaces becoming more and more inaccessible for the common people. But at the same time, we have seen sprawling private green areas coming up. How do you think we can democratize access to green spaces?
Well, I think you're asking a question which will put me in a lot of trouble. The High Court has recently said we shall only protest in one point in this sprawling metropolis. And I wonder sometimes, I go to court often because I argue my own cases there, and many a time I wonder, why is it that question came before the judiciary at all? It is not for the judiciary to define space, and especially the space for political action. So I agree with Disha that, the whole concept of thinking that there is such space which is neutral does not exist on this planet. There must be marks for that, I think. Now, why I say that is because I think we are caught in this very Victorian view, probably driven by upper caste tendencies to believe that there is an existence that is possible without being engaged with politics. With the digitalization of our lives, even our private spaces have become political, right? When I was hearing Dr. Shetty speak, I was saying that technopia is such a dystopic view of the future. And I'm not comfortable with treating my health myself through a glass interface, which you call a cell phone. Where are the real connect that we can have? It's in the commons. It's in the public spaces. And we are restricting public spaces, and we are actually commodifying public spaces. We are actually commercializing public spaces. And that is why we fought in court from 2008 to 2012 on the principle of the public trust doctrine, which the Supreme Court has upheld, as being fundamental to public life. Without that, your streets will become private spaces. Today it's lakes, tomorrow it's park. I mean, the Cubbon Park issue is what? Whoever gives the horticulture department the right to define it has to be a smart park. So am I unsmart because I live 15 kilometers south on the edge of the city, that I cannot access it, and when I come, and Mr. Umesh Katti is now the Minister for Forests. 10 years ago, we protested against him because he actually had the idea of putting an electronic ID card to enter Cubbon Park, to restrict use of the park. Before that, Justice Saldana had passed a lot of orders, which many of them were problematic. One of that was the peanut seller should not sell peanuts there. And for me, the whole idea of going to Cubbon Park was not just the Balbaon train from my childhood days. It's that I could go have cotton candy, I could eat sautekai, I could eat. I mean, this is life in a city. Life in a city is not what, Mr. Narayan Murthy or Mr. Shetty or I or you who have access to power define. And I think that cultivated understanding of what is an inclusive city, where a Dalit, an LGBTQ, a Muslim, a Christian, anybody should be able to access the commons. And yes, I worry with you that the fact that we have got gatedness becoming so like a pandemic is a deeply divisive factor. And we are looking at 2040 as a Bangalore which will be a divided city unless we take course corrections now.
Thank you very much for that. Professor Ramachandra, I would want to ask you one last question. I think we will have just 1 minute, you will have 1 minute to respond to this. So it's great to see people like you, scientists like you are coming out and engaging in public debate and action and ensuring that there is action. But we don't see a new crop of scientists who are engaged in such action. So why do you think it is so?
Well, if you look at this one, as a scientist, especially from IISc, institution like IISc, we are supposed to do society-relevant research so that the benefit of research should go to the society. That's how I started my journey. And fortunately, I have a stream of youngsters who have been trained under me. Today, in fact, Sudhira is here. Dr. Sudhira was my student. And because of such youngsters, there are many more youngsters who are getting into the stream. Now, one of the programs which I've been doing is environmental education through the network of schools and colleges. And also, I organize a symposium, popularly known as a Lake Symposium, where I have given a platform for the school and college students to come to the symposium, interact with the international and national, the experts. In that process, the capacity building happens. The classic case of mini forest, you talked about it. 49 native species, 500 saplings planted way back in 90s. At that time, groundwater table was 150 feet. Today, it's at 10 or 15 feet, I have a water. You sensitize the youth with environmental knowledge. They become environmentally literate citizens. That's what the country is required.
Sir,
then they will think about the prosperity of the nation by conserving the nature.
Sir, I would just like to interject. Do you think that you have enough government support?
Well, there's a mixed this one. So we have been successful in some of the aspect. I would say that maybe the 40 to 50%. But for a scientist like me, if I score 40 marks, I wouldn't have got the seat in IISc. I need to have 99%. So that is what I'm looking for. Okay. And I hope that's where whenever I come out, I make it a point to come with my scientific document and try to impress upon or tell the people how they think about it. For example, the Chief Minister talked about the drains, to address the problem of floods, 1,500 crores. Now, what is the drain development is? This is nothing but concretization, narrowing the drain. It is going to create more problem in the city. 1,500 crores gets into the drain. We will not solve the problem. That is where scientific inputs are required. That is where we need to understand why drains and lakes are required in the city and how to address the floods in the city. The city of Bangalore, when 1,452 water bodies were there, storage capacity was 35 TMC. In a city where 15 TMC of water comes, we had a storage capacity of 35 TMC. Today, we have a storage capacity less than 1 TMC.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much for your thoughts. So, as we know, I think the discussion today triggered our thoughts, and we conclude the session hoping that it will end in some action, in collaboration. Thank you very much.